President Bola Tinubu, Nigerian president, is expected to attend a summit of G20 countries, which will hold for 2 days in New Delhi, India, starting from September 9. According to presidential spokesman Ajuri Ngelale, President Tinubu plans to seize the opportunity of the summit to attract private capital for the development of the nation's critical infrastructure. G20 is considered the premier forum for international economic cooperation, which plays a critical role in shaping and strengthening global architecture and governance on all major international economic issues. While Nigeria's participation in global economic forums such as the G20 summit has always been characterized as little more than acts of adventurism, almost totally bereft of purpose, and mostly lacking in knowledge and know-how needed for meaningful engagement with the biggest players in the global economy. The delegations have always been top-heavy on politicians and their cronies with pretty negligible contribution from technocrats. With President Tinubu set to take part on the biggest stage of them all, will things be different this time? And what should be priority on his to-do list in India? Professor Adele Jinadu is a senior fellow, executive fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development. He joins me now to have a quick conversation on the subject. Good to have you on This Day Live, Professor Jinadu. Thank you for joining us. Prof, well, we went to...
Ruben, thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you, sir. Well, we went to the BRICS Summit in South Africa as spectators who were on the sidelines. G20 now, President Tinubu has announced that he will be traveling with about 45 business industry captains, and maybe even a longer list of persons. But we're just going there as spectators. So what do we gain from going as spectators to all this G7, BRICS, and now G20? We will even have a delegation that will be probably larger than that of the major players. So are we really going to bring investments by just showing up on the sidelines?
Well, I think multilateralism is always a good thing. It brings people from all over the world together. But I think it also has its own, there are contradictions. It has its promises, it has its disadvantages. And I think we need to sit back and assess how much have we gained from all these multilateral meetings we have been attending in the past. And I think the starting point is that to what extent have these various multilateral meetings been able to change the structure of global politics and global economics. In fact, my own sense is that those meetings, in fact, further deepen the command of the Western industrial societies over the world economy. And we're just going there as sidelines, as more or less marginal groups, having little impact or no on what eventually comes out of those meetings and what happens in the world, global economic structure. For example, for the past 50 years or so, we have been talking of a new international economic order. We have not made much progress. The little concessions they make to us, in fact, help to deepen. I think we should turn our attention nearer home. How can we develop the various regional economic communities in Africa, ECOWAS, SADC, and then make them forceful economic institutions that will work for their own people? You know, the whole emphasis on bringing in external aid, attracting investor, is that, of course, the world economy is not a free competitive world economy. We start from a disadvantaged position. For example, it's easy now with devaluation. It's easy for capital to come in, but then what we are sending out becomes more expensive for us. So I think the important point is not whether we attend these meetings, but the kind of orientation we take into them, and then relate this to the whole structure of global politics and economics. So unless we do that, this is simply be another photo opportunity to have delegations going to all these meetings. And it is also important, I mean, when did this regime decide to attend the G20? What agenda is on the G20, and what are we taking there as a country? Have we thought out what we are going to do as a country? Or we are just going to sit back and watch and then move around and talk to people and promise? I think it's important that we take a deep look at these things and start looking inwards in terms of what can African countries do among themselves, and that is where we should lay our emphasis.
Well, Prof, I've had the view expressed in certain quarters that Nigeria, even having a chance to just show up there, even if for photo opportunity, will confer on the Tinubu administration a certain kind of legitimacy. Is that how legitimacy is conferred on governments in Africa? That
is a theory. They already know what we are, who we are. They know our contradictions, and they just want us. We go there, and the important point is that what does the G20? What will it offer us to even know what we are going to bargain for there? I mean, if you look back, for the past 50, 60 years, it's been the same, ritual. We go there, we come there. We are not fully prepared going there. Our delegations go there. They can't bargain well. I mean, because they have the facts that the industrialized countries have, we don't have them. And then most of those who go there spend their time, shopping. And then when they come back, whatever decisions they bring back, resolutions they bring back, one of the things we found out, for example, in the African peer review mechanism, is that all these meetings that African countries go to, and they sign agreements, they sign standards and codes. But when they come back, those standards and codes just sit down somewhere. They are not taken, they are not referred to the Ministry of External Affairs, Justice, External Affairs, to look into those things properly and see whether they are in our best interest. And those that are just there are never domesticated. So if you go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs today, or you go to the Ministry of Finance and ask, look, do you have a list of multilateral agreements that Nigeria has signed, and those that they have been domesticated? It's not easy to have access to them.
Well, Prof, it's good you mentioned the African Union. Earlier on this same program today, I was having a conversation with Ambassador Olusegun Akinsoya, who I'm sure you know very well. And I had asked him a question. Why is the African Union so ineffectual in the face of coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Conakry, Niger, Chad, and the latest one in Gabon? AU does the same thing of saying, oh, we have suspended your membership. But to what effect, really? And he was saying there must be a need for the AU to come back to the table and redefine its purpose and essence. Do you agree with him?
Well, I agree with my good friend, the ambassador. But you see, it's a very, very complex issue. And you cannot talk about it, again, without relating to the structure of global politics and global power politics, for that matter. One of the problems we've had in Africa is that the colonial inheritance of the 60s is still very much here with us. Our politics is in shambles. Our economies are in shambles. And we are getting more and more dependent on the external world. While our own people getting more and more poverty, they get more deepened in poverty. Our political leaders are not interested in them, in catering for them. Chapter 2 of our constitution, as you also have it in many other African countries, is virtually disrespected. No government takes it seriously. We still take as our focus the democracy which we have inherited, unlike the one which the African Union and many other African organizations have talked about in terms of a people-oriented democracy in line with the Arusha Declaration. But we still go after the West, the industrialized countries, and we try to copy their concept of democracy, which is not working. We need to refocus our attention to make sure that we align our economic development with our political development. Each time I listen to debate on the television, people talk more about the economic problems. But what about the political problems that are important? You cannot build a viable economic system on a faulty political foundation. You know, the whole argument between Nkrumah and Houphouët-Boigny, seek ye first the political kingdom, is still as relevant today as it was then. So you cannot move ahead when the political framework you have is totally disaligned from the economic system that you are trying to build. So we must go back to the political issue in terms of how we select our leaders, how we hold them accountable. And these are political questions. They are not economic questions. Because even the economy itself, you need to have transparency, you need to have accountability, you need to have participation in it. But if your political system is none of the above, then the same thing with your economic system. Otherwise, we keep on this charade of putting in place neoliberal economic policies that are anti-people. We've gone through the SAP, the era of SAP, and we see how much damage it did. Now we are going back to that same era. SAP is now coming back in a different guise, and we are buying it hook, line, and sinker. So we need the African Union, and it has already, African Union has set out a good political framework within which we can progress in Africa. And it's this homegrown framework, not the neoliberal one. But most of our countries just disregard that homegrown system because they keep looking outside. And they care less for their people. They are sucking to corruption. So you have a way of, they are more or less recycling themselves, and that is the problem. And this is the same group of people who will go to the African Union. This is the same group of people who will sit in parliament, because their orientation is similar, and they're just playing the game. And the Western world know, of course, that this all is charade, but they play along with us. So I think it's important that we look back at the political framework that the African Union has set in place. How can we make our leaders accountable in the sense of putting in place those African codes and standards of democracy, which they have signed? And those codes and standards are not your neoliberal type. They are the type which is people-oriented, which is grassroots-oriented, and yet we are moving further and further away from it.
Well, Prof, finally, one of the subtextual issues that have come up is about Nigeria's foreign policy process. And under President Tinubu, we've been hearing things that, President Tinubu will rejig Nigeria's foreign policy process. What exactly should that mean in real terms? Because there are Nigerians who have kicked against Nigeria's involvement in whatever the situation is in the Republic of Niger, or even President Tinubu trying to get directly involved in terms of consulting with other leaders with regard to what is happening in Gabon. Many Nigerians are saying, let's worry about Nigeria. Can we make this foreign policy driven by domestic policy more concretely, rather than saying Africa wants to worry about the rest of Africa? What do you think? Do you think there's really an urgent need for a rethinking of Nigeria's foreign policy?
Definitely, I think there is. I think we need to have some kind of a national dialogue on our foreign policy under these present circumstances. I think it's very, very important. But my worry is that it's unfortunate, we've had over several years now, very, very weak institutions. Because you cannot have a strong foreign policy, you cannot have a strong democratic system where institutions are weak, where institutions have been paralyzed. And I think it's important, because there is a lot of heavy work that we need to do. I think we need to sit down and see how we can rejig our national institutions to become what they ought to be, in terms of, providing advice, in terms of policy implementation. I think our public service today is in a terrible shape, and it's not really prepared. Even ordinary service delivery to our people, they cannot do it. There is corruption everywhere. So I think it's important that you can't really separate foreign from domestic politics. So as we strengthen our local institutions to perform to pursue domestic policy, that will also provide a fillip to strengthen our foreign policy institutions in terms of, I mean, take the NIA, for example. There was a time when the NIA was at the forefront of developing policy in this country. The NIA has gone down, and there's an attempt now to bring it back. So we need to think seriously of the NIA as a strong foreign policy think tank. The same thing with NIPS in Jos Kano. You should provide a strong foreign policy think tank, linking domestic with foreign policies. But what do you have? I mean, I'm happy that former ambassador to the OE, talking about this. But the important thing is that, again, we have a situation between the civil servants and the think tanks, some kind of a mutual jealousy, you know. And once you have that, I mean, it becomes so they are coming to take. We are the foreign policy people. We are the ones giving we should think about. But let us have a synergy of think tanks and the public service working hand in hand. We have not had that happening for a long time. Even when people like Bolaji Akiyemi were there, there was this whole disjunction between the civil servants and the quote-unquote experts. You know, it makes a whole lot of a problem for us. And then you have the situation where you have so many special advisors, and then the civil servants are not happy about that, because what is the job of the civil servants then? If you are having special advisors, you know, what is their role in the old policy pipeline? So I think what we need to do is sit back, and it's not going to be something you resolve in 2 or 3 years, because it has really gone bad, very, very badly. And we need to start that whole process now. You know, maybe to take 3, 4, 5 years before things can become what they ought to be. But what is important is that we must bring back in applied policy research to bear on our foreign policy.
Well, on that note, I would like to thank you very much, Professor Adele Jinadu, for joining us on This Is Live, this Sunday talk show.